Hello, I'm Sara Darling, and this is Intentional Trip, Psychedelics for Modern Mental Health. Today I'm sitting here with Dave Hodges, who is the founder of the Ambrosia Church. He also opened the first cannabis club in San Jose and has worked with numerous groups to help pass legislation to decriminalize these sacred medicines. Thank you so much for being here today, Dave.
Thank you.
So, what would you like to share with us about your early psychedelic experience and how you got into this powerful work?
Well, the mushrooms kind of dragged me into it. Before I tried mushrooms, the only thing I'd ever done is a lot of cannabis, and I ended up starting a cannabis church in Oakland shortly after Decriminalized Nature passed their law, which brought all entheogenic plants the lowest priority. And that was kind of a sign for me that we needed to start supporting other plants. Mm-hmm. And out of the plants listed, mushrooms were the only ones that people could actually have their own experience with without someone guiding them. Mm-hmm. And they were something that I was drawn to for a long time, but at that point I hadn't tried them. So first I had to experience them, and they just kind of dragged me pretty far deep. It started with a 2-gram ceremony that was, the fun experience that a lot of people have with mushrooms. And then straight from there, I started with the 5-gram, the heroic dose. And the very intense ceremony, I came out in a loop, and that loop was all about learning how to breathe and doing more mushrooms. Now, being a human, I was like, what do you know, mushrooms? I'm breathing right now. But knowing that the lethal dose was somewhere around 4 pounds, I decided, okay, well, I got to try more, especially since I'm the leader of this church, and I have to understand these things. So a few weeks later, I did 10 grams, which another very intense experience, but I came out in the same loop. You need to learn how to breathe, and you need to do more mushrooms. Well, this time I actually Googled how to breathe, and if you do that, you'll find a TED Talk, and you'll find doctors talking about how, as a society, that we've stopped breathing right. And what was crazy was I was one of those people. Right. So I was physically breathing wrong, and I didn't know it. And that's what really, that's where things got weird. Because how did I know that I didn't know how to breathe? Right. And the fact was that after the first time, I was sure that I knew how to breathe, and I was sure the mushrooms didn't know anything. After the second time, when I looked it up, here I was physically not breathing right. And the reason the doctors are talking about is elderly people are now having breathing problems just because they've stopped using their diaphragm, and they've been breathing wrong their entire life. Right. So how did I know that I was one of those people? Right. And for me, there's really only 2 possibilities, and both are powerful, and I think they're both actually true. But one is that mushrooms allowed me to connect with something inside myself that was able to then clearly communicate, hey, you're doing this wrong. Mm-hmm. The other possibility is the one that I believe the most, is that there truly are guides on the other side, and they knew this was the first lesson I needed to learn before I moved forward. Right.
Powerful stuff. When did you decide that you wanted to make this your life's work?
It was really decided for me long before I understood it. As I worked my way up through the mushrooms, I started getting more messages and understanding why I went through everything that I've gone through in my life. But at the point that I opened the first cannabis club in San Jose, my goal was to end the war on drugs. Yeah. And I didn't really understand fully what that meant at the time. Now I understand it a lot more, but at the end of my journey with the cannabis industry, when legalization passed in California, which was a very bad form of legalization that I knew was going to destroy the industry, it took me to one of the lowest points in my life. I mean, literally, I just watched an entire industry that I loved be destroyed. Right. and Trump got elected at the same time.
Fuck all.
So the combination of those two things really brought me to a really low point in my life. And I struggled through it using cannabis, and when I opened the cannabis church, I was still struggling with it, which was, knowing that I was doing the right thing, but not knowing if this was really what I needed to do. And then the mushrooms took over. And, so I told you about the 5 and the 10. At the 15 gram point, that's where the entities actually started coming through.
Right.
And I met some entities that told me just directly, we need you, and this is why everything has happened in your life, because we need you for this moment.
Right.
And that was a little overwhelming, but I clearly understood it, and it makes plenty of sense.
Yeah, definitely.
And then my message coming out of that journey, because my first set of journeys, I would always come out in some form of loop. That one, it was, there's more knowledge to spread and do more mushrooms. So it was, very important for the path that I'm on.
Yeah, amazing. Amazing. So tell us more about Godssitters and these high dosage mushroom ceremonies that you're doing.
Yeah, so Godssitters is a organization that we're building to actually host ceremonies for people, because on these really high dose journeys and ceremonies, they can be extremely intense.
Yeah.
And what we really need is somewhere that we can keep people safe when they're on these.
Definitely.
You don't want to do these in public. You don't want to do these in front of your kids. And whoever you're going to do them in front of is going to see you at some of the most vulnerable and embarrassing points of your life. Right? But going through these ceremonies can truly help you understand why you're here and what you truly are. So for us, they are one of the most important experiences anyone can have. But again, we need to make sure that we have a place where we can keep you safe and people trained to make sure that any situation that happens, you can feel completely comfortable knowing that we can handle it.
Definitely. So what can you tell me more about like the intake process, the ceremony itself, and then the integration thereafter?
Well, so a lot of things we're in the middle of developing.
Nice.
The intake is, right now, it's people that have been coming to us that really need it. And it's one of those things we're just following the path of the mushroom.
Right.
So it's not, we're not actively looking for people doing these ceremonies, but we're recognizing that these people need the help, and we're using that to build all the experience that we need to help everybody else.
Indeed.
During the ceremonies themselves, we do it using tea. We recommend that people fast for 24 to 48 hours before, just to clear out their system. And then during the ceremony itself, it really depends on what the person needs to go through. And, this can be extremely emotional, it can be extremely terrifying, it can be extremely enlightening. It's very rarely fun, but there are points that can be very enjoyable too. So it's literally anything can happen.
Right.
And what we're trying to do is make sure that we can keep you safe and provide the best experience for you to have on your own, and actually have the experience to move through what you need to do.
Definitely. And so you're also like audio recording these ceremonies so that the participant can go back and listen to their experience, correct?
Yeah, the audio after the ceremony is extremely important.
Yes.
To actually hear the lessons and the knowledge that you bring back and what you're going through. One, it can help you remember more of the experience, because especially when people first start doing these things, there's a high likelihood they're not going to remember what happened.
Right.
They'll remember it was extremely powerful,
right,
but they won't necessarily remember what exactly happened.
Yeah.
So the audio recording lets them, one, hear any message they might have for themselves, but also by hearing the audio can bring them back to the place that they were at, so they can understand what they were going through and why they were going through it.
Definitely. And then integration thereafter. I mean, obviously the audio is part of it, but then is there like an open door policy to be able to talk about these experiences thereafter?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we're still developing a lot of this stuff,
Right,
but
right.
after the ceremony is extremely important.
Yes,
You know,
yeah.
it's you've just gone through one of the most powerful things in your life.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to have a good space to relax and to integrate. I mean, it's less of integrating and more just trying to understand what just happened.
Right.
Because some of these things don't necessarily directly integrate into what you're going through, like they would on lower doses.
Right.
In the higher doses, you can transform into things, and you can experience realms and dimensions that are really indescribable. So it's hard to integrate something that's indescribable with your existence.
Completely.
But that doesn't mean that the experience wasn't incredibly important. It's that it's much harder to understand how that will help you on a day-to-day basis. But at the same time, there is a lot of things that you will experience and go through in the ceremony that will help you. Mm-hmm. So it's a matter of you just reflecting on that.
Yeah, wonderful. What medicines have you experienced? What medicines would you like to experience? Where, and perhaps is there anyone that you would like to have facilitating for you?
For me personally, I up until I tried mushrooms, I had done nothing but cannabis in my entire life.
Right.
I smoke a lot of cannabis, and my height, I was smoking around 2 ounces per day.
Oh my God.
Which,
Wow.
is a lot of cannabis,
Holy shit,
to
man,
say
yeah.
the least. So I'm kind of the extreme on both ends. The mushrooms work that I do, consuming an ounce of mushrooms in a month is, I don't necessarily want to say a goal of mine, but something that I try to have at least a strong ceremony once a month. Doesn't always happen like that. But other than cannabis and mushrooms, that's all I've ever done and all I really need to do at this point. I have had a couple experiences with DMT, but DMT and high dose mushrooms are virtually identical.
Yeah, you were showing me the molecular compound of it and how they are just a small little piece. It's wild.
Yeah, it is wild. So psilocybin breaks down into psilocin, and if you compare the psilocin molecule to DMT, they're virtually identical. The only difference is the psilocin molecule has a little extra tail on it.
Right.
But other than that, it's basically the same thing. And as far as the effects, the big difference is with the mushrooms on these high doses, you're in these spaces for somewhere between 2 to 4 hours. So it's with DMT, you're talking about 15 minutes.
Right.
Time is irrelevant.
Completely.
And both on the DMT experience, it may seem like 100 years. And on the high dose mushrooms, it may seem like thousands of years. But in reality, you're in these spaces for a longer period of time, so there's more that you can do.
Yeah, wow. So what are, with the psychedelic, revolution upon us, what are you most excited for to see? What are you most fearful of?
Well, for me, these high dose experiences are incredibly important. And although these tools are also medicines, these are ancient tools for us to understand what we truly are.
Indeed.
And for me, getting more people to have these experiences in a safe way and to understand the true meaning of religion is what I really look forward to. There's one thing to learn something from a book or be told by somebody else. There's a completely different thing when you can truly experience it.
Yes, truth.
When you understand what you are beyond this physical body and what the other side is truly like.
Yeah, well, and I mean, and I believe, we both believe that the world religions came from psychedelics. Yeah,
no, without a doubt. One of the things that we talk about in the church is the origins of all religion came from these mushrooms.
So what are you most excited about with the psychedelic revolution upon us? What are you most fearful of?
Well, so what I'm most excited about is that people can have these experiences and truly start understanding religion. You know, there's a big difference between listening to somebody tell you something or reading something in a book versus having an actual experience.
Yes.
And at these really high doses, they are the type of spiritual visions and experiences that can't really be described with words. You have to experience them.
Indeed.
So, you know, I'm really looking forward to a day where people understand these things more and more people can have these experiences.
Definitely.
On the other side, you know, these are not for everybody, depending on what physical health conditions you might have, or mental health conditions you have, or drugs that you might be on. There's a lot of things that can interact in the wrong way. And then there's a huge possibility for manipulation. You know, even at the high doses, it's still there, but really at any anything from a gram all the way up to these 30-gram ceremonies, the people that you have around you, if you have the wrong person, they can definitely influence you and even manipulate you in different levels.
Right.
So it's, you know, people need to understand how to use these things right and how to pick who they're using them with, right?
Indeed.
Which is, again, one of the big goals of Godssitters is for us to be able to provide that safe environment where people can have these experiences without being worried, any worry of being manipulated or anything wrong happening to you.
Right, right. Powerful. What can you tell me about the legislation that you've, you know, worked to help pass? Kind of the double-edged sword that goes along with that, like with, you know, the cannabis law passing and then, you know, seeing a lot of people's livelihood be destroyed. How do you feel that can also, the intersectionality between that and the psychedelic revolution?
Well, it's a very important lesson to understand what happened around cannabis in California. So Prop 64, which was the legislation that passed, was actually not written by people who understood the industry.
Right.
It was designed by the Chief of Police Association and the League of Cities to stop medical marijuana.
Interesting, yeah.
And then instead of, there was a community initiative that I was working on that was designed by people who understood how everything worked and understood what we needed as an industry to move forward. And instead of everybody getting together around an initiative like that, they were at the mercy of some larger groups that passed. They took what the state was working on, they changed it a little bit, and they put it out as an initiative. And again, this was not written by the people in the industry. This is written by the people who want to stop what they see as the wrong things happening in the industry. So there's a huge need for citizens to get together and to create legislation that will actually change laws and change criminal penalties to allow people to have the businesses that they want to have, to build the structures that they want to build. And if we don't do it, the likelihood is that things will pass that are much worse than we could possibly imagine. You know, and that's exactly what happened in the cannabis industry in California.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a pity. Hopefully that'll get, you know, remedied here, and that they'll be able to do it the right way with psychedelics.
Hopefully. I mean, things are, unfortunately, as of right now, going in the similar direction. You know, you have a lot of people in the community who have some expectation that they can make everything perfect. And instead of passing something that would be good, they want to stop everything until they get the perfect thing. Well, the downside of that is the likelihood is that the really bad thing will pass instead of the good thing. So you may be holding out for the perfect, but you will likely never get the perfect. And it's much rather to have the good than the really bad. You know, and that's really unfortunate, but I do see that already starting to happen with the psychedelic movement.
So when do you feel psychedelics and mushrooms aren't the right choice for a particular person?
You know, it really all depends on the person.
Mm-hmm.
The things that we can say for sure, you know, one of the few. There's only been 2 or 3 deaths that have ever happened from mushrooms,
Mm-hmm.
and from physically taking the mushrooms. One of them was a 24-year-old heart transplant patient.
Oh, wow.
And there's something that happens between the transplanted heart and your own system,
Mm-hmm.
where if you have a heart transplant, you should not be taking mushrooms.
Right.
So there's a few medical conditions like that.
Mm-hmm.
The other is the reaction with antipsychotic drugs.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're on any sort of antipsychotic drugs, you're going to want to clear your system of those before you start doing the work with the mushroom.
Indeed.
Which definitely can be a big challenge. You got to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that you have the right people around you to take care of you while you're doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, in my opinion, they're really something everybody needs to experience. You know,
Definitely.
people need to understand what they are outside of this body,
Mm-hmm.
because this meat puppet that we're wearing right now is just that.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just a meat puppet.
Yeah.
And we are something much bigger, much more powerful, that transcends space and time.
Amazing. Truth. Is there anything that you'd like to leave our viewers with today?
I mean, the biggest thing is to make sure that, you know, if you are going to use these tools, that you work with the right people to do them. You know, you got to be very careful, because you can be putting yourself in very vulnerable situations. And although they are extremely important, there is a huge possibility people could be doing the wrong things. And if you're looking for a safe environment and a safe place, the Church of Ambrosia, which our website is ambrosia.church, or Zidedoor, which is our physical location here in Oakland, and that's Zide with a Z, Z-I-D-E, door.com.
Great. So you're also the founder of Zidedoor Church of Etheogenic Plants here in Oakland, and you were raided, of course. What can you tell me about founding the church? What can you tell me about the raid?
So Zidedoor actually started as a cannabis church, and shortly after we opened up, Decriminalized Nature passed their lowest priority for all entheogenic plants.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a sign that we needed to shift directions and support all plants.
Mm-hmm.
But the goal behind opening the church really has always been to fight a federal court case to protect the religious freedom to use these sacraments. We were expecting to get raided, you know, not that we wanted to be raided, but
Right,
we were
of course.
expecting it was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we weren't expecting how it happened, though, being that it was actually the local PD, the Oakland PD, that raided the church. And there's, you know, that's really, it was all meant to be. The details of the raid are pretty interesting, but long story short, they didn't take everything. I actually managed to negotiate with the cops to stop the raid partway through, and the church reopened 24 hours later.
Amazing.
So we're still here. We still believe in what we believe, and that raid is now going to lead to a federal lawsuit where we will be suing the Oakland PD for violating our religious freedom.
Hell yes. Thank you for watching. This has been Intentional Trip, Psychedelics for Modern Mental Health. I have been here today with Dave Hodges, founder of the Ambrosia Church. Thank you for watching, and stay safe.